You know what the most frustrating thing is for most guys, bro? It's trying to talk to a woman, whether in person or via text, and feeling like she's bored, distracted, or even worse, disinterested, that she doesn't give a damn about him. This is really bad for a man, even if he won't admit it. There are a lot of guys who don't admit it. This is hard, I know, because it really affects our egos. I always say this, you need to focus on your own life and that a woman shouldn't be the center of your life. I even said a phrase here that I liked. We were talking with the team and I said this, the man who puts the woman first and forgets his purpose loses both. Loses the woman and loses his purpose. What you'll discover in this video isn't just another generic tutorial on how to start a conversation. Here you'll understand why the right words spoken in the wrong way have the same effect as sweet poison. They seem harmless, but they silently kill any chance of connection. You'll understand the invisible architecture of female attention, how conversation, when poorly conducted, activates the next button in her brain. And worse, she doesn't even need to think. It's automatic, biological, instinctive. And in that moment, your appearance, your status, or your intentions don't matter. Only one thing matters. Did you trigger emotion or not? This is the boundary between the ordinary man and the magnetic man, between what she responds to out of politeness and what she remembers even unintentionally. And the answer isn't in being the most handsome, the richest, or the funniest. It's in knowing how to play with what everyone ignores. The female mind is an emotional mirror. It intensely reflects everything you truthfully deliver. But to do so, you need to move beyond shallow conversation. You need to abandon the comfort of "Hi, how are you?" and delve into territory few men dare to tread, emotional depth. And don't confuse depth with drama or cheesy romanticism. Depth is the art of provoking the other to reveal themselves without realizing it. It's the power to lead a conversation as if opening a door to her unconscious. As Ortega y Gasset would say, loving surrender is born of fascination. But there is only fascination where there is mystery. There is only surrender where there is stimulation, and there is only connection where there is contrast. The seducer doesn't win over by saying pretty phrases. He provokes reactions no other provokes. He is the deviation from the predictable path. He is the exception amidst boredom. Most men talk to fill time. The seducer talks to carve presence. Every word is a small spark. And even the pauses carry meaning. A woman senses when she is in front of someone who is not just going through the motions. She senses when she is in front of someone who lives in the moment, who looks with intent, who speaks with purpose. And that's why this type of man is dangerous. Because he knows what he's doing. And what's more, he knows what she feels, even before she admits it. Modern men have been conditioned to believe that the path to winning over a woman is paved with good manners and generic empathy. Respect, compliment, show interest. And yes, all of this has its place. But the problem is that this advice, when followed literally and without personality, creates the profile of the most dangerous man for himself. The predictable guy. The harmless one. The talkative swearer. The one who never bothers and therefore is never remembered. There's a silent tragedy here. Well-intentioned men are discarded because they fail to activate any emotional register. No buttons, no tension. They talk to women as if they're trying to please a boss or win the affection of a lady in the elevator. And they forget that what drives female desire isn't comfort, it's internal vibration. It's contrast, it's warmth, it's the rare. That's why phrases like, "Hi, how are you? How was your day?" work exactly like a sedative. They don't bother. But they don't excite either. They're not offensive, but they also don't provoke any reaction. The same goes for the classic "Good night, princess," "You look beautiful today," or the famous killer combo, "So, what did you do?" These phrases, which seem harmless, are actually poison. Not because they're wrong, but because they're identical to everything she's heard today. She doesn't need to think. She doesn't need to feel. She just slips your message into a mental drawer labeled "more of the same" and moves on. Here comes the first major contradiction I want to show you. You think you're being respectful, when in fact, you're being passive. You think you're being kind, when in fact, you're being forgettable. And in the game of attraction, being forgettable is a worse fate than being hated. Because at least hate carries emotion. Indifference doesn't. And this is where many men go astray. They confuse kindness with connection, and they don't realize that, for the female mind, connection requires energy, not just good intentions. Robert Greene wrote that seducers don't care about what looks right, but about what evokes fascination. And herein lies the key that separates the average man from the magnetic man. The former seeks acceptance, the latter seeks impact. The former seeks approval, the latter seeks to be remembered. And this difference changes absolutely everything about the way he talks, moves, and positions himself. Let's dive even deeper. Women are exposed daily to a barrage of generic stimuli. They open Instagram and receive empty compliments. They walk down the street and hear repetitive comments. They talk to guys who want to chat for fear of seeming too forward. The result? They create unconscious filters, emotional barriers, defense mechanisms that automatically ignore any attempt at contact that sounds generic. And guess what gets filtered? The kind of conversation you've been trained to have. Polite, linear, soulless. Here's a point that almost no one understands. A woman doesn't consciously choose to ignore you. She simply doesn't feel anything. And that's why you disappear from her radar. Your mistake wasn't a bad line. It was the lack of spark, the lack of unpredictability, the lack of intention. Because what truly catches a woman's attention is what activates her emotional mind, not what passes the nice guy test. This is where you need to stop thinking that being polite is enough. Because the problem isn't the content of your conversation, it's the emotional context it carries. If you say, "Hi, how are you?" with the same energy as a supermarket cashier asking debit or credit, it doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are. Your communication lacks weight, and without weight, there's no impact. It's like trying to mark an iron sheet with a ballpoint pen. The form may be right, but the force isn't. And herein lies the secret. What makes an impression isn't what you say, it's what she feels as you say it. The tone, the rhythm, the intention behind the words. A hi said with presence is worth more than 30 compliments sent out of obligation. And this is only possible when you stop trying to follow a script and start experiencing the conversation as a game of presence, provocation, and delivery. But the good news is that it can be learned. No one is born knowing how to converse deeply. No one is born with the ability to generate real connection. This is a skill, an emotional language that can be developed. But first, you need to abandon the guise of kindness. You need to stop hiding behind safe phrases and start delving into the art of evoking presence, mystery, and emotion. Because if you continue to be the polite, kind, and harmless guy, you will continue to be the guy she respects but doesn't desire. The guy she responds to out of pity, but not with excitement. The guy she forgets before she even remembers his name. And that, my brother, is not destiny. It is a choice. The choice to continue wearing a social armor that doesn't protect, it only suffocates your essence. And suffocated, you don't vibrate. And if you don't vibrate, you don't attract. I'll explain it to you now, the hidden mechanism of female desire. Understand, a woman's desire is a labyrinth, and most men enter this labyrinth with the wrong mindset. They think they're in a job interview. They think they need to project a good image, give the right answers, be polite, respectful, and positive at all times. But her mind doesn't operate like an HR department searching for resumes. It operates like an emotional radar, searching for stimulation, contrast, and presence. While you're trying to be good enough, she's unconsciously asking herself, does this man make me feel something no one else does? And if the answer is no, she tunes out. Not out of malice, not out of arrogance, but out of instinct. Evolutionary psychology teaches us that the female brain has been trained over thousands of years to seek emotional connection and select partners who provoke an internal impact. This is why idle chatter, even if well-intentioned, is quickly filtered out and discarded. Her body knows when it's faced with something ordinary, and her body reacts before her rational mind intervenes. This is the true battlefield. It's not the content of the conversation, it's how the conversation makes her feel. Here comes a concept that Robert Greene masterfully outlines in The Art of Seduction. Imagination is the true field where desire is born. A woman desires what takes her out of the obvious, what transports her, what raises questions, not just answers. The seducer, according to Greene, never offers everything directly. He insinuates, he teases, he He leaves gaps, because he understands that the female mind is more excited by what she imagines than by what is handed to her on a silver platter. Mystery isn't a decoration, it's a weapon. This is why well-structured but unintentional sentences fail miserably. A compliment can be just a compliment, or it can be a trigger that stirs the ego, curiosity, and desire. The difference isn't in the words, it's in the emotion they carry. It's as if your speech has a frequency, and her brain only tunes in if that frequency provokes some kind of internal vibration. It's biological, it's neurological, and if you're still trying to impress with logic, you're playing on the wrong field. Neil Strauss, in his book The Game, shows how masters of seduction don't stand out for being the most handsome or intelligent, but for understanding the dynamics of emotion. They create tension, they play with expectation, they challenge, and above all, they break the mold. Because they know that what kills desire is predictability. When she already knows exactly what you're going to say, how you'll react, how you'll compliment her, her mind disconnects. Not out of malice, but because there's no surprise. And without surprise, there's no desire. This is where the average man begins to rebel. He thinks, but I'm good, I'm honest, I'm stable, why does she ignore me? Because her desire doesn't respond to his logic. Because her desire is a rebellious force that seeks what is emotionally rare, not what is socially acceptable. And you can fight it, or you can learn to play by the right rules. The choice is yours. But before you decide, understand this. The woman is not purposefully testing you. She is simply responding to the stimuli you, consciously or unconsciously, provoke or fail to provoke. Let's look at a practical example. Two men text the same woman. The first writes, "Hi, how are you? I hope your day was great." The second texts, "I just saw a woman on the street with the same ironic look you gave her when you said you didn't like pizza. Just for the record, I still think you lied." Which of the two will she respond with more curiosity? Which of the two will provoke a memory, a feeling, an emotional spark? The second. Always the second. Because he activated 3 triggers that the first ignored. Emotional memory, light provocation, and originality. The female mind operates as a system sensitive to stimuli that generate an internal narrative. When she reads something that makes her imagine, remember, doubt, or laugh, she connects. When she hears something that seems to have been copied from a how to start a conversation tutorial, she tunes out. That's why you need to learn to use what I call emotional curiosity. Instead of asking, "What's your hobby?" ask, "What weird habit do you have that almost no one knows about, but if they took it away from you, you'd freak out?" This requires reflection, exposure, and connection. And the more she reveals herself, the more she connects. This is the secret no one teaches. The true power of conversation lies in making a woman look within herself and associate this inner journey with your presence. When you become the man who makes her think about herself in a new way, you become an emotional anchor. And women don't forget anchors. They forget, "Hi, how are you?" Another vital element is communicative presence. The way you listen, look, and respond. When you truly listen, without rushing to respond, without needing to please, you convey security. You become a safe haven in the midst of chaos. And women are mesmerized by this energy, because deep down they live surrounded by men who crave attention, not by men who truly offer attention. Listening is a form of subtle domination. When done well, it hypnotizes. Add to this the light and playful challenge, and you create an explosive combination. Teasing, when done lightly, tells a woman, "I'm not here to please you. I'm here to play with your ego and get you off automatic." And that, to the female mind, is an aphrodisiac. It's like a reminder that you're not desperate, that you have self-worth, that you are the exception. And in this game, being the exception is the only rule that matters. Now you might be wondering, but isn't that manipulation? No, it's awareness. Manipulation is trying to force a result. Seduction is understanding emotional mechanisms and playing with them in a genuine and present way. And that's what differentiates the manipulator from the seducer. The former feigns interest to win. The latter is genuinely interested, and therefore wins. There's also the power of authenticity with imperfection. When you show who you are, with vulnerabilities, opinions, and even mild scrutiny, you humanize the conversation. And the human, when not constantly trying to please, becomes more real. And the real is magnetic, because everyone is pretending. Everyone is playing roles. When you go off script, you become dangerous. And danger, in the right measure, is exciting. Finally, we need to talk about the language that most activates the female brain. Metaphors, stories, and symbolism. Women are creative by nature. Their imagination responds more to images than to data. So instead of saying, "I like freedom," say, "I feel at home anywhere I can walk barefoot and no one will think it's strange." This creates an image. This creates sensation. This creates connection. This is what differentiates the average man from the memorable man. The former tries to make conversation to seem interesting. The latter creates internal experiences that transform the woman as she talks to him. And this transformation is addictive, because she doesn't feel this with just anyone. And when she feels it, she becomes addicted. And when she becomes addicted, you've won. I'll now introduce you to the gold of this video, the secret language of memorable seducers. This language begins where ordinary conversation dies. It begins when you stop trying to be interesting and start making her feel interesting. It seems subtle, but it changes everything. The average man enters a conversation trying to prove his worth, trying to showcase his achievements, his good taste, his stability. The memorable seducer enters a conversation like an explorer. He listens more than he speaks. He digs, he observes, he touches on points no one else sees. He becomes the one who reveals in her a version of herself that even she had forgotten existed. And that's power. Because women don't connect with words, they connect with who they become with certain men. Therefore, the first layer of this secret language is provocative listening. It's not just listening to what she says, it's reacting in a way that deepens, that stimulates, that challenges. If she says, "I'm very sweet," the average man responds, "That's beautiful." The magnetic man counters, "Is that cute or dangerous?" He nudges, he plays with meaning. He turns her answer into another question. This prolongs the game, this builds tension, this reveals. The second layer is the emotional metaphor. The seducer doesn't communicate like a robot. He paints scenes, he transforms feelings into images. He speaks as if each sentence were a canvas. He says, "Talking to you makes me feel like I'm opening an old book with pages full of notes I don't understand, but I can't stop reading." This is hypnotic. This is memorable. It ignites a woman's limbic brain, responsible for emotion, memory, and desire. This symbolic use of language is no exaggeration, it's neuroscience. Research from Emory University has shown that metaphors activate sensory areas of the brain that direct language doesn't. In other words, when you speak through images, you literally enter her body. You make her feel. And when she feels it, she doesn't forget. But that's not enough if you don't master the third element, energetic presence. Speak slowly. Look into someone's eyes. Be silent between sentences. Respond calmly. Be fully present. The average man rushes the conversation trying to keep it lively, afraid of silence. The magnetic man understands that silence is where tension resides, that a sustained gaze says more than 100 words, that the right pause before a sentence carries more desire than any compliment. A woman senses this. She senses when a man is truly present, and this presence is an aphrodisiac. The fourth layer is charismatic challenge. The seducer is never trying to please. He challenges with lightness. He provokes with style. He plays with her ego. Be careful. You look like someone who falls in love quietly and then disappears. Or, "I don't know if I should trust someone who says they hate coffee. That seems like a warning sign to me." These are light-hearted phrases, but they create a game she wants to play. Because it's not about offending, it's about poking enough to generate an emotional response. This takes her off autopilot. It activates competitive mode. And women, though they rarely admit it, love to be challenged when the challenge comes with charm and boldness. It's the opposite of most guys who are afraid to contradict, to disagree, to play around. And that's why they fall into the category of predictable. The seducer understands that to create desire, there needs to be a slight emotional friction. Without it, the conversation becomes a job interview. And here comes one of the most overlooked pillars by those trying to learn seduction: the courage to be imperfect. The magnetic man doesn't try to appear ideal. He talks about his mistakes, his exaggerations, his contradictions. He shares stories where he didn't come off as a hero. And this creates identification, because the woman realizes he's not trying to sell a persona. He's showing who he is, and therefore becomes unique. Imperfection, when shown consciously, generates emotional depth. The Forbidden Manual addresses this precisely. It explains that true seductive power lies in showing your shadow with control. In other words, you reveal your vulnerability, but without depending on her validation. This creates contrast, strength and fragility, rationality and emotion. And the female mind is attracted to contrasts. It's the mix that fascinates. Don't just be the good guy. Don't just be the mysterious guy. Be both. Mix, contrast, surprise. The fifth and perhaps most powerful element of this language is the emotional direction of the conversation. The average man goes with the flow, reacts, waits. The seducer leads. He has intention. He doesn't just want to chat. He wants to transform that exchange into a portal, into a space where she feels different, where she sees herself differently, where she desires more. And to do so, he creates mini narratives within the conversation. He says things like, if we were to see each other right now, I don't think it would be a normal conversation. We'd laugh about some silly things, maybe even tease each other until one of us stands up and says, enough, I can't resist anymore. Or you'd ignore me for 10 minutes just to maintain control. But I know you. In the end, you'd look at me like that, and that was it. It's over. This is a script. This is cinema. This is desire in the form of words. It can't be ignored. Do you notice the level of the conversation here? It's no longer about what's your favorite TV show or what's your sign. It's about creating a shared emotional reality. It's about making you present in her imagination, even without touching her. Because desire isn't born from touch. It's born from anticipation. And whoever controls the anticipation controls the game. Now you might think, but isn't that too much? Doesn't it sound fake? Not if you're connected to what you're saying. Seduction isn't about falsehood. It's about conscious emotional intentionality. It's about knowing that your words create a mood and using them authentically. You don't need to lie. You just need to know where you're going and conduct yourself with style. The most important point is that this language doesn't depend on beauty, money, or status. It depends on emotional training, on sensitivity, on courage. It's a game of risk, on presence. And that's why so few master it, because it requires more than phrases. It requires vulnerability with awareness, energy with direction, charm with provocation, and presence with intention. When you master this language, something magical happens. A woman starts telling her friends about you. She revisits conversations. She looks for reasons to respond. She imagines you. And without realizing it, she begins to desire you. Not for what you said, but for who you were while you were talking to her. That's the bottom line. Memorable seduction doesn't come from words. It comes from the emotional experience you create with your presence, your language, and your intention. And it's not about memorizing phrases. It's about developing an identity, a presence, a communication style that transforms every conversation into a sensory, intimate, and thought-provoking experience. Because in the end, a woman doesn't remember what you said. She remembers how she felt around you. And you, from now on, will choose, be the guy she respects or be the guy she desires. But be careful. This power comes with responsibility. Because the more you master this language, the more you understand that seduction isn't about control. It's about surrender. It's not about dominating. It's about guiding with intention. And the more you deliver truth with impact, the more unforgettable you become. Be the man who provokes, who challenges, who expands, who leaves a mark. Because in this world of lukewarm conversations, the man who speaks with fire is the one she never forgets. At the end of the day, there's a truth few have the courage to face. What makes you forgettable isn't your appearance, your lack of money, or even your lack of status. What makes you forgettable is the fact that you left no emotional experience alive in her mind. You passed, but you didn't leave a mark. And the blame for this isn't just your insecurity or your eagerness to please. It's something deeper. It's the communication model you've always been taught. A predictable, linear, boring model. A conversation model that follows the same old social script. Empty compliments, generic questions, polite attempts at conversation, emojis that replace intentions. All very prescriptive. All very forgettable. But the real game of seduction, what few voices have the courage to teach, is that a woman desires what challenges her emotionally. what takes her out of her comfort zone, what throws her into conflict with her routine. That's why she ignores the too nice guy, the one who's nice to everyone. Because that guy doesn't trigger what she needs to feel. Curiosity, surprise, tension, freedom, challenge, desire. And this game isn't learned by osmosis. It doesn't develop through experience alone. It requires study, practice, and above all, a change in communicational identity. And here's the final point, the most brutal of all. If you keep talking like everyone else, you'll continue to be treated like just another guy. That's why I created the Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds. Not as another book on seduction, but as a strategic portal to reprogram your language, your presence, and your conversational energy on a visceral level. This material is the direct antidote to everything you've heard about starting conversation or being yourself. There, I teach in surgical detail how to trigger desire in less than a minute of conversation. Then it's not magic. It's neuroscience applied to attraction. It's the psychology of emotional contrast. It's intentional symbolic manipulation used not to deceive, but to fascinate with presence. You'll learn why certain phrases trigger the release of dopamine in women. You'll discover how to lead a conversation so she can never get you out of her head. You'll understand why metaphors spark excitement, why narratives create sexual tension, and how to use questions that seem innocent but plant desire with surgical precision. The video you watched today showed you the pain. It showed you the problem. It exposed the raw truth that talking like everyone else is the shortest route to oblivion. But the Forbidden Manual is the practical, real, and strategic solution. It's the map you need to stop being ignored and start being remembered with intensity, desire, and respect. And it's not just about women. It's about any interaction where you want to be magnetic. The same principle applies to closing deals, generating authority, and silently influencing. Because the heart of seduction is commanding attention in an emotionally and quietly powerful way. Today's world is a war for attention. And those who don't master emotional communication are discarded without ceremony. The most attractive women have access to hundreds of men every day. They've already heard every compliment, answered every generic question. If you're not different, you'll be a statistic.